If you're not betting huge for value in these 5 spots, you could be leaving a ton of money on the table. I'm going to show you why I like to put in an unreasonable amount of betting discs every time one of these 5 situations comes up. For context, my name is Marc Goone. I played poker full-time for over 5 years. I started at $1, $2, worked my way up and played as big as 200, 400, and netted over 7 figures along the way. All right, without further ado, let's count it down, my top 5 spots to go huge with value, starting at number 5 when the turn is a blank. All right, so we're playing 2-5, 1K effective, gonna open up pocket queens on the button. Villain's gonna call on the big blind. Look at that, what do you know? Jack 9 deuce with a couple of spades. They're gonna check it over to us. The question I ask on the flop is, what is the biggest size where they raise off their strong stuff and still call with their weak stuff? Half pot's usually gonna get that done. Going to entice them to raise off with hands like Jack 9 suited, pocket 9s, pocket deuces, but still call with a weak range that we can get a ton of value from across the rest of the hand. So we are going to go half pot on the flop. They are going to call on the turn. They are going to check to us, and the question I like to ask on the turn before determining my sizing is, are they capped? And if yes, I like to go big, and if no, I like to go small. So usually getting to the turn, the best hand they're going to have is a hand like Ace Jack or King Jack, right? You got an AK-47 pointed at your head, and I say, listen, you've got to make this guy fold Ace Jack right here, right now on the turn. What size are you betting, right? You're probably betting absolutely massive because you just don't think Ace Jack is folding here. I like to default to putting in a very big size on the turn when the turn is a blank. They're not folding Ace Jack right now. Put in more money while you can. All right, my number 4 spot to go huge with value, when bottom card pairs. All right, so let's look at an example here, and this can apply when bottom card pairs on the turn or when bottom card pairs on the river. This example, we're gonna have aces on the button, the second best hand in poker. We open it up. Villain's gonna call, whoa, the dealer, Queen 9 deuce. That is a little strange, peculiar, but Villain's going to check it over to us. Again, we're gonna choose a size on the flop where they raise off their strong stuff and call with their weak stuff, so usually around half pot. They are going to check call. We go to a turn, and now the turn pairs bottom card. So I want to talk about why it's so good to go big in this spot. Villain is just not going to have much of the bottom card represented in their range. They're just not going to have a ton of trips here after they call the bet on the flop. Players get much stickier with top pair on paired boards, but they get much less sticky when they have draws. So it is kind of a balance here. I think you will find if you start going huge on this turn, players will certainly start folding hands like Jack 10 or gut shots for sure, because now that the board is paired, they are unsure even if they get there if their hand is going to be good. While they're going to be getting more elastic with their draws, I think they get less price sensitive with their top pair. And in this situation, if they do have a hand like Queen King or Queen Jack, I just don't think they're folding for even huge sizes here on this turn. And I think one of the mistakes I found I was making was just going too small in this spot, trying to recap them on this turn and get them to raise off whenever they have trips, and just missing out a ton of value against hands like Queen King and Queen Jack. We should almost treat this as a blank and just go with that big overbet. Even the 9x gets more sticky in the spot because now their hand to them technically has improved to 2 pair, and I just don't think they find a bunch of folds on this turn. So I think sizing up here with value on the turn is going to be very, very good. Treat these bottom card paired turns and rivers as more of a blank turn or river and choose that big size once again. All right, guys, real quick, if you're enjoying the video, please hit that subscribe button. I make videos every week just trying to give out as much value as possible and boost your win rate. And I make videos based upon what the algorithm tells me you guys like. By subscribing, that means you guys like this video. I will make more videos like this in the future. Thank you guys. Have a gentle day. All right, my number 3 spot to go huge with value when the villain takes a bet check line. Let me show you. All right, let's walk through it here. Villain's gonna open in the cutoff. We are going to call on the button. In general, I'm not a huge fan of doing calling, especially when recreational players open. I'm generally just playing 3-bet or fold. But let's say in this specific example, we've got a really big whale in the big blind here, Sean Bradley, and we are super, super deep with this player. And we would love for this guy to come along with dominated hands because he's gonna be the type to make 200, 300, 400 big blind mistakes post flop. We are going to call here, Jack 9 deuce. What do you know? Villain's going to c-bet for just a little under half pot. We are going to call, go to the turn, which is a blank. Villain is going to choose the standard bad reg size in this spot, which is going to be around 2/3 pot. We are going to call again. Now we go to a river, which is another blank, and now Villain is going to check. I want to talk about this heuristic, which I think is really, really important. Recreational players generally check the river to check call. So let's keep that in mind here. When they check this river, right, what do they have on this river? Well, they either have a busted draw that decided to give up here, or they have a pretty good hand like Jack X that is planning on check calling on this river because all the draws brick. So what should we do in this situation? Well, we have a value hand. One of the things I like to ask to kind of distance the forest from the trees is ask, what would we do here if we had a bluff? I probably wouldn't want to go big, right? Because if villain has a hand like ace jack or king jack, I just don't think they're ever folding in this spot when they check the river. They're checking to check call. Now, if they also have a draw, they're gonna fold if we breathe on the pot. So if I had a bluff here, I'd probably go relatively small, which means, let's flip it back to when we have value here. We have ace jack, we're back to reality again. That means we should probably go absolutely massive, right? Because if villain has a busted draw and they're giving up, we're not getting any more money from that hand anyway. But if they do have a hand like queen jack or king jack or jack 10 here, I don't think they're folding, right? I just used to go way too small in this spot. How do I know? Because I used to try to bluff this spot and I would bet 300 and I would just get tank called every single time by king jack. Well, what does that mean when we have value? When we have value then, if we're getting called so often when we're bluffing here, if villains are checking this river to check call, when we have value here, we should just be blasting. It's really easy to make a mistake and just go 2/3 pot or pot here on this river. And I think that's just leaving a ton of money on the table. I would almost always overbet when all the draws brick. So they check it over to us. I'm going to go 1.5x pot here. I think you could probably even get even more greedy. And I just expect to get called here quite a bit when they have a worse jack. My number 2 spot to go huge for value, when villain check raises the flop and then checks the turn when the nuts change. Let me show you. All right, so we are going to open ace 7 of spades on the button. Villain is going to call in the big blind, jack 9 deuce, what do you know? And we are going to c-bet half pot here on the flop, as is the MO. Villain is going to check raise to $75 here on the flop. Well, we've got the nut flush draw. We are in position. I think when villains check raise on this board, they're just going to be heavily weighted towards value here because they're almost always going to be raising off hands like jack 9, pocket 9s, pocket deuces, stuff like that. Here we have a pretty easy call. We don't particularly want to get jammed on if we decide to go for a bet 3-bet here. Villain's just going to have a little bit too strong of a range. We don't have much fold equity here. Also, we are ahead of a lot of their draws that could be raising here. So pretty standard call, I think, in position. We go to a turn. Look at that sweet baby there.
Look at that sweet baby there.
And now villain is going to check. This is one of the biggest mistakes I was making personally. And I think in this spot, we should be going absolutely massive. Why should we be going massive? Well, first, let's think about what is villain's range. When villain check raises this flop, what is their range mostly going to be? Hands like pocket 9s, pocket deuces, jack 9 suited. They're just going to have sets into pair here when they check this turn. Why don't they just have a lot of flushes here as well? Well, they probably just don't have many flushes because number 1, flush draws would not always check raise the flop. Let's say flush draws check raise the flop 10% of the time, 20% of the time, somewhere in that vicinity. Let's say the type of player who's going to check raise a flush draw on the flop, are they in general going to be more passive or more aggressive? That player is going to be more aggressive, right? And so an aggressive player raises a flush draw on the flop. Now they get there on the turn. What are they going to continue doing a large majority of the time? They're going to continue betting. If they were a passive trappy player, well, they probably wouldn't have raised their flush draws on the flop. So they don't have many flushes here, but they do have a ton of 2 pairs and sets. And are the 2 pair and sets going to fold for any size on this turn? No. So I think the mistake I was making in this spot was just going half pot, 2/3 pot, just getting lazy with that bad rake sizing in the spot and not really taking into the account villain's range here. We want to set up an SPR as small as possible on the river. Villain's just almost never folding a set on this turn because they can call, and in their mind, you know, they're getting odds to boat up. If they boat up, they're going to get the money, right? That's what they're thinking. If we go like 100 on this turn, pot's going to be 392 and we're going to have 800 back. We're not going to stack sets. But if we go absolutely massive on this turn, I don't think villains are folding deuces or 9s here. And the goal here is to sculpt that river SPR. So when we get to the river, look, now the pot is 842. We've only got 580 left. And now they're getting quite a price on the river. So set up that SPR on the turn so they just can't fold a set. And finally, drum roll please, the number 1 spot you should be going huge for value in live poker, when you check raise. All right, in this example, we are going to play out of the big blind as the pre-flop caller here. Villain opens on the button. We call with ducks. Why are they called ducks? We go to a flop, jack nine deuce. Deuces, by the way, are a pretty decent hand. If you know the flop is coming jack nine deuce with a couple of spades, I would almost always play deuces in that example. So we are going to check it over to the pre-flop raiser. They go half pot here. And I think this, again, was maybe the biggest mistake I was making in live poker was just check raising the standard bad reg size to 3 to 4x in this spot. I think almost all live players are going to play worse if you put them in unfamiliar territory. Villains in position in live poker make a couple reoccurring mistakes. Number one, they just stab or c-bet way too much. Number two, they telegraph their hand strength with their sizing. And number three, they do not protect their check back range when they do check back. They just don't have enough strong hands. If they just have a hand like pocket sevens that is just mindlessly c-betting here, they're folding whether we check raise 3x or whether we check raise 30x. It doesn't matter. Pocket sevens are just going into the muck. If they do have a hand like ace jack here, if they do have a hand like ace x of spades or queen 10 of clubs, I would say none of those hands are folding, whether we check raise 3x or whether we check raise 9x. And because villains aren't used to looking at this spot, I think we can just exploit the shit out of them by just targeting that top 10% of their range that is just never folding in a million years when we take this huge check raise size. So I'm going to take an absolutely ridiculous check raise size here to 9x on this flop. All right, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video on 5 spots to go absolutely huge for value, and it makes you so much money you turn into a hippopotamus. Thank you guys, and have a gentle day.